So your practice sheet for this week is last week's quiz. I ain't graded them yet, but I don't expect it to be pretty. So hopefully nobody missed the first one. That's just distributive property. So -4 plus 4x minus 12 plus 2x plus 10, if you can distribute, equals 8x. Maybe combine your like terms. There's a 6x. You got a -16 there. Add 10 minus 6 is 8x. Subtract 6 from both sides. -6 equals 2x. Divide by 2 and x is -3. Solve the equation for number 2. You're going to have to use the zero product property, so you're going to set the whole thing equal to a 0. And I didn't specify. I guess you could have done the quadratic formula. But my intention is to give you something that factors. To make a 6, a 3 and a 2 are your friend. The outside's 21x and the inside's 2. And if it was a positive 21, take away 2, you'd get your 19. And now you get to use that zero product property. 7x minus 2 is a 0. 7x is a 2. Divide by 7, x is 2/7. Or x plus 3 is a 0. And that's easy. X is a -3. Moving forward. Find the zeros of this thing. Now you had the benefit of looking at your answer choices on this one because it was multiple choice. And I know one of them was -1. So we're going to synthetically divide out that -1. And the goal was to reduce to a quadratic. So anyways, we drop 1, we get 1. We multiply, we get a -1. 2 minus 1 is 1. -1 times 1 is -1. Add to 16, multiply, get a negative. Add to 16, multiply, get a negative. And while you're taking the quiz, I talked about this could be a repeated solution. So let's try it again. We drop, we multiply and we add. We multiply and we add. We multiply and we add. Remember, remainder constant xx squared. I am left with the expression x squared plus 16. It's the last factor because it's a factor, a potential factor. I have to set it equal to 0. And I subtract 16 from both sides. And the opposite of squaring is square rooting. So x is the square root of a -16. Don't forget plus or minus or baby panda dies. And I know this is the imaginary root of 4. All right, factor the polynomial. Now this is a factoring by grouping. You also could have filled out the answer choices. But if I look at the first two terms, they contain an x to the second. If I pull that, I'm left with x minus 4. And that factor has to repeat if I am in fact doing factoring by grouping. Now to make this 36 a negative, you have to factor out a -9. So your common factors are x minus 4, and the crap that's left over is x squared minus 9, which is what we're starting to factor in algebra 2 right now. That's a difference of 2 squares pattern. Factors x minus 4 times x plus 3 times x minus a 3. All right, you had your evaluation problem. Evaluate 8 to the -5/3. That's 1 over 8 to the +5/3. You're thinking about x to the p over r. This becomes 1 over the cubic root of 8, all to the 5th. The cubic root of 8 is 2. And 2 to the 5th, if you do 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, should be 137. Number 6, find the solutions of the absolute value inequality. One of your equations is as is. The other equation, you have to change the sign on the stuff inside. That's how it works. And we just add 2 to both sides on this one. So 6x is less than or equal to 6. X is less than or equal to 1. We subtract 2. -6 is less than or equal to positive 2. When you divide by a negative, you have to remember that you flip the inequality symbol. And -2 over -6 is 1/3. So, if you think about what you've got here, you're stuck between these two numbers. You are. Sadly, you know, your test is written using intervals, but you're bigger than a third and you're less than 1. And that is equivalent to the notation 1/3, 1, using interval notation. Left bound, right bound. That's all it is. Left boundary, right boundary. This one you guys got to omit because the right answer wasn't there. The intention was that you would factor it. That was the intention. You'd factor it, and you'd get some x-intercepts, -3/4 and 5. And then you would draw a parabola. And you know, since this is positive, you know, end behavior, you'd have a decent picture. Somebody screwed up when they made the quiz, and that would be me. So you got to omit it. So to draw this tail, x has to be less than 3/4. Positive is above x-axis, by the way, if I forgot to mention. And to draw this tail, x has to be bigger than 5. So as an interval, I'm -infinity all the way to 3/4, unioned with 5 to infinity. That should have been the right answer choice, just wasn't there. Number 8, use the decimal approximations to the local maxes and local minimums during the intervals on which the function is increasing. You're increasing along this tail. There's 2 of them. There's that piece of the graph, and there's that piece of the graph. So this piece starts when x is -infinity because it is moving left slowly. But that piece starts at -infinity, and it rises until you hit an x value of -1.36881. And then you have to get down to the next piece down here, which starts at 0.1395 and stops at 1.04955. All right, moving on to 9, the transformation. I don't know if you can tell or not, but it's been reflected. You see how this little guy moved up here? There has definitely been a reflection. It has definitely happened. And so we just call the function f. To make g of x, we have negated that function f. Now, if I just did a straight up reflection, this point right here would have been right here. That's where it would have gone. So let's think about that. It would have been at 1, 2. Something else happened to it. I went to the right 3, and I went up 4. So to go right inside a set of parentheses, I actually subtract. But to go up, I just keep the sign. So that's the correct answer for that one. All right, 10, a quadratic has a vertex at 4, -2. Determine the vertex of the quadratic after the transformation. F of x minus 3 plus 5 has been applied. This is a shift right 3, which adds 3 to x. And this is up 5, so add 5 to y. So if I add 3 to 4, I'd be at 7. If I add 5 to y, I'd be at 3. Determine the domain. You know that you cannot divide by 0. You should know that by now. So x squared minus 5x minus 14 cannot be a 0. You are in pre-calc. You should know how to factor. If you can't factor, I don't understand. So you want to be -5 minus 7 plus 2, not 0. So x is not -2 and x is not 7. So your answer choice was all real numbers except x equals -2 and 7. Number 12, find the domain of the square root function for any square root. The stuff inside is greater than or equal to 0. So 5x plus 10 must be greater than or equal to 0. 5x is greater than or equal to, sorry, not 10, 20. -20 divided by 5, x is greater than or equal to -4, which if you think about a number line, you're here, and you get to be everything to the right, you're -4 to infinity. 13, you have the difference quotient, also called a derivative, of 3x squared plus 4x. So we're going to plug that x plus h in first. That is squared, so you write it twice. And if you do these about 3 or 4 times, you'll catch on. The big thing is, will you start doing them? Anyways, x plus h times x plus h is x squared and h squared. That's the first and last. And your insides, make an xh plus an hx, which is 2xh. Yeah, just erase that whole line. There's a 3x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. Kick in the distributive property, plus 4x plus 4h, and then clean up. Use that distributive property again. 3x squared plus 6xh plus 3h squared plus 4x plus 4h. Now, to save time, we'll introduce the rest of this function. See where it says take away the function? I have to take away all of 3x squared plus 4x. Now, we did one of these before the quiz, and I talked about how whatever's in here has an opposite out there. So 3x squareds cancel. There's a take away of 4x. That counteracts the adding of 4x. So what are we left with? We're left with 6xh plus 3h squared plus 4h all over an h. And the h's cancel. All 4 pieces contain an h, so you get to remove at least one h from everything. There's also a form, too. This comes next. If you'll take calculus, you'll get y. And the h is last. Because it's kind of what I think it was called a residual, maybe, if I remember. It's just this unknown thing left. It's so small it doesn't really matter. Identify all the asymptotes of f of x equals x squared minus 6x plus 5, sitting pretty over x minus 3. And this was multiple select. Now, your vertical asymptote happens in the bottom. It's literally x equals 3. It happens when you try to divide by a 0, if you forget. When you talk about the horizontal asymptotes, you'd be thinking about the power function, x squared over x, and you get x, and that is not a horizontal line. So I don't have one. So I'm going to have to find what's called the slant asymptote. And I do that through good old long division, which you guys could do. I don't remember that being an issue. So it takes an x to become an x squared. In distributive property, take away 3x. Wrap before you subtract. This is negative 6x plus 3x, which is negative 3x. Bring down the 5. Now it takes a negative 3 to become this. And when we subtract here, we're left with negative 4, which means I'm done. This is the remainder. That's my slant asymptote. Slant asymptote is y equals x minus 3, and it has no other asymptotes. What's up, boys?
That basics professor is still showing a 0.
I probably haven't gone back and fixed it, Will.
Okay, well, that one, I was gonna make sure they were good, because that one in the matrix, because they're supposed to be good.
You haven't finished the matrix test, have you?
The part one and part two?
Yeah.
I thought I did that though, the day with the substitute.
I thought I saw notes that you didn't know how to do it, so I don't,
Oh, yeah, that was that test. Well, the part one I did, it was just the part two.
okay, I'll go back and look at that folder.
Yeah. I just didn't want to know, okay, you did it before the report part of it.
I'll take care of it.
Okay.
15, a function is even, has y-axis symmetry if f of negative x is f of x. Function is odd and symmetrical about the origin. If f of x is f of negative x, determine whether g of x, which is 2x to the fourth minus 2x squared, is even, odd, or neither. So start with this test. Plug in a negative x, figure out what it is. Now, you know by now, if you take a negative and raise it to an even power, you get back a positive. So think about -1 times -1 times -1 times -1. It's 1. So you get back the positivity. And this is going to become positive too. You're not doing negative times negative is positive. This squared becomes positive. And you'll notice that this is equal to f of x. Even. There's even all day long. 16, there was a typo on yours on your answer choices, but we fixed that. Restrict the domain. You're supposed to know how this looks on the graph. It's left 4 and down 7. And it's a parabola. And the only piece I keep is that guy right there. I don't keep the left-hand side, I keep the right-hand side because it's increasing. That's why we keep it, because it's increasing. So when I talk about my domain, this is where the typo was. If I can pick it. I'm having technical difficulties. There we go. Talk about my domain. Oh, weird. Quit writing. All right, so we just write it out. Domain is that I get to be bigger than or equal to -4. So -4 to infinity. All right, now you're supposed to write your inverse. Your first rule about writing an inverse for the bajillionth time with y'all is you swap x and y. You resolve for y, and you use your correct notation. After the negative first of x, read the inverse of f of x. In this case, it's actually going to be g, not f. I don't know why that didn't use a set of parentheses there. All right, so step 1, we swap x and y. We get the, in this case, the g out. It should have been one of the easier ones for y'all to do. I really made y'all write a lot of inverses last year. We add 7 to both sides. Now we counteract squaring by square rooting. I don't have a square root option here, so I'm going to use the 1/2 power. Remember, that's the same thing. And now I'm going to counteract the addition of 4 via the subtraction of 4. And as far as the range goes, because you had to state the range, you have to think about what the graph of this thing looks like. That's a square root function. Really wish I had my stylus back, but it quit working. I don't know why. I give up on it. I am left 7 and down 4, I'm down here. And then I draw the square root function. Remember I went left 7 down 4, left 7 down 4. So when you talk about your range here, it's going to be -4, rising to infinity. Okay, let's try this for the 4th time. There we go. And I did forget down here that I need to write you that using notation. This function was called g. And there you go. Done. Anyways, most of y'all didn't even bother doing a twin this week. Try and do better. I just don't know what to do with you. How's that test going, Olivia?